Welcome, and thanks for visiting the American Atheists website. I'm Ellen Johnson, president of American Atheists. This past Thanksgiving, Americans consumed a lot of turkey, but this week I want to talk about pork. Lots of pork, specifically the political variety in the form of money pouring out of Washington, D.C. and right into the coffers of religious organizations. I'm talking about government grants and unconstitutional programs, and that most despised method of raiding the federal treasury, earmarks. Within days of his inauguration, President George Bush used his power of executive orders to establish the White House Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives and began channeling government money to religious organizations to operate social welfare programs. There are now faith offices in some of our most powerful government agencies like the Department of Health and Human Services, the Justice Department, the Agriculture Department, and the Labor Department. The President also signed an executive order creating additional faith-based centers in the Departments of Commerce, Veterans Affairs, and the Small Business Administration. The latest effort to help religion in America is to distribute money from the Department of Housing and Urban Renewal to build and maintain houses of worship. And the reasoning behind this is that if these buildings are going to be used for providing social services, well, we should give them money for building maintenance and expansion. The faith-based initiatives support religion because they funnel money and people into the churches. And the churches are allowed to, quote, maintain their religious character, which means proselytize. Now, secular programs already exist to handle these outreaches. The only thing that religious groups do differently is to administer religion in various ways along with the services. Of course, gods are always given the credit for the good that is done, not the taxpayers who pay for the services. But I must say that I'm gratified when religions employ atheism to help America's needy. Feeding the hungry, sheltering the homeless, giving medical treatment to the sick and injured is atheism. Invoking the aid of the spirit world is what religion does. And that does not solve problems and does not deserve the aid of the government. The faith-based initiatives have become the largest transfer of taxpayer money into the coffers of religious groups in American history, and this has been done with minimal oversight and accountability. When George Bush was the governor of Texas, he instituted a faith-based program, and the Texas Freedom Network has produced a report on the first 5 years of that program, and it shows that during those 5 years, the faith-based programs put the community at risk. It did this by loosening regulations for faith-based providers. They pretty much regulated themselves. Regulations on health and safety standards were reduced and even eliminated so as not to burden the free exercise of religion. And they reported that there was a commingling of church and state funds. Here's a quote from a 2006 Government Accounting Office inquiry. Quote, 4 of the 13 faith-based organizations that offered voluntary religious activities, such as prayer or worship, do not appear to understand the requirement to separate these activities in time or location from their program services funded with federal dollars. So some of the most vulnerable members of our society have become targets of religious proselytizing at our expense. Here's another quote, and this one involved a federal case from December of 2006 that examined the operation of a federally funded evangelical program inside a state prison. And keep in mind that programs like this are all the rage across the country. Judge Robert Pratt wrote in his decision, quote, the state has literally established an evangelical Christian congregation within the walls of one of its penal institutions, giving the leaders of that congregation authority to control the spiritual, emotional, and physical lives of hundreds of inmates, end quote. Pat Robertson was an early critic of the faith-based initiatives, but he changed his tune when the Bush administration handed one of his charities, Operation Blessing, $500,000. And get this, Robertson has proposed that religious groups lining up for government grants should request what he calls special audits, administered not by third-party government agencies, but by the White House Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives. Well, isn't that the fox guarding the hen house? Over a dozen states have established their own faith-based initiatives, and the money even trickles down to local communities in the form of so-called development block grants, and from there to the local churches and other religious charities. And you thought that religion survived because of memes and humans' fear of death? Religion survives because of government support. Let me give you some idea about the scale of this operation. The New York Times listed hundreds of appropriations that appeared in the congressional record and were distributed to religion-based groups. Keep in mind that these grants are separate from the White House faith-based initiatives. Some of them are so vague that it's not quite clear where the money even went. And let me tell you about the latest travesty of pork barrel funding for organized religion. In the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development and Related Agencies Appropriation Act of 2008, there is an $800,000 appropriation to something called the Morning Star Ranch, which is described as, quote, a Christians-only training center for youth who have made a commitment to Christ and want to grow in their walk with Him, end quote. This $800,000 slice of pork is an earmark thanks to U.S. Senator Sam Brownback of Kansas. Earmarks, as you know, are pet projects for lawmakers where the appropriations bill conveniently circumvents the regular legislative process as well as competitive bidding. The faith-based initiatives and earmarks amount to a religion tax on the American people. It forces millions of Americans who are atheists, freethinkers, humanists, and others who are not religious to have their tax money benefit organized religion. And unlike secular and government groups, religious groups don't have to obey civil rights and other anti-discrimination statutes. That means that Pat Robertson's Operation Blessing can take public money but refuse to hire gays or atheists or anyone else who happens to offend their religious sensibilities. Now, while American Atheists is not established to provide social services, we support the time-tested secular institutions that abide by civil rights laws, government regulations on building, health, and safety, and are financially accountable to the American people and employ modern, effective methods of care and service. And if you're angry about all of this that I've talked about with the faith-based initiatives, and I hope that you are, because it's your money, please help us do something about it. We need your membership. We need your support. Join us in fighting the imposition of a religion tax in America. Thank you for visiting American Atheist website.